Okay, the final part of our project is view 4. So in view 4, we want to include invoice information. So for the purpose of this exercise, we are going to put all the information that is needed, which is the sender information, the receiver information, and also the parcel information. Okay, but in reality, basically the invoice will be very simplified, but because I think we are going to learn something if we do it in full, so that is why we will include most of the things that we have for the invoice information. Okay, so for this, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to actually add the layout and also the controls. So the first thing that I'm going to do for the invoice information is to actually add several other things. Okay, so let us go to view 4. Now this is for invoice information. So rather than to have just one invoice information for everything, so what I'm going to do is that for the invoice, so I'm going to actually add, I'm going to be make some minor changes here. So this will be the sender information. This is similar to what we have done in view 1. Okay, okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take this one and do some changes. So these text boxes, I will replace this with labels. And for the address, so the city, the postcode, city and state, I will put in one row. So let us go to the controls. Okay, now what I will do now is that I'm going to actually copy the whole of this table from the render receiver user control. Okay, then we will make the necessary changes here. Okay, now this is the whole table. Okay, okay, so I want to make sure that I have covered everything. Okay, now I also need to copy the styles, so in case that the styles are different. So what I'm going to do now is that let us copy the table first, and then we will deal with the style later on. Okay, so copy this. So I go to the PosLaju forum. Okay, now for this, similar to what we have explained last week, so it is more difficult to include this in a user control because the code that we need to write to read from one user control into another user control, there's a lot of work to be done, so it is not worth it. So basically what we will do is that we will include everything here, okay, in the main form, which is the PosLaju form. Okay, now so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to click Ctrl KD. Okay, so this one. Okay, now for the sender receiver, so it will involve the use of certain text style. So I'm going to copy this, go back here, so I scroll up. So this belong in the head area. Okay, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to paste this style here, Control KD. So this is okay. So the style, okay, within the form should be within the head. Okay, now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change these text boxes into labels. So what I do is that I'm changing this. So from text box into label. So txt name, this will become lbl name. Okay, so we have it. So label does not have it. So as long as it needs to be. Okay, so now this is the first one. Okay, the second row we have address one. So what we are going to do is that we are just going to label address. So and the rest there's no address 1 2 3, so just address. So I actually change this, the text, to address. Now the text box here, okay, I'm going to change this to label. Now the ID for this will be LBL address 1. So this is the first line of address. The width, I will delete the width. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, we have the third row, which is address 2. So basically, I do not want anything here. Okay, so it's just enough because we have address here. So no need for this. Okay, so I'm going to change this text box into a label. So the ID will be LBL address 2, and I will delete the width. Okay, now for the next row, so now this next row, I will actually put in the postcode, the city, and also the state. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to change this into a label. So this will be label. Okay, we have postcode, so I'm going to type in the postcode first. LBL postcode. Okay, observe the spelling of POST, postcode. Okay, now I delete the width. Now this is the first label. Okay, now next to the postcode, I would like to have this would be the city. Okay, the city. So the next will be LBL city, and next we have the state, and this will be LBL state. Okay. Okay, similarly, I'm going to change this text box for phone to a label. Okay, let us change this first, and we will concern ourselves with the formatting later on. So this will be LBL phone. Okay, and there is no width. And finally, we have the email. So this would be a label, and the ID would be LBL email, and we delete the width. Okay. Okay, so basically in general, this is how it will look. Once we have this, okay, I think this is not finished, because basically we need to differentiate between what we call the sender and the receiver. Okay, so if we are to use the name LBL name here, so it would be vague in terms of, does this refer to the sender or does this refer to the receiver? So what I need to do now, because this is actually sender information, so I will further modify this ID to reflect this is the sender information. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a sender word here. So now from LBL name, this becomes LBL sender name. So LBL address 1 will be LBL sender address 1. LBL address 2 will become LBL sender address 2. LBL postcode will become LBL sender postcode. LBL city becomes LBL sender city, and LBL sender state will replace the LBL state. Okay, for the phone number, so this will become LBL sender phone, and we also have LBL sender email. Okay, so this is the naming. Okay, so this is actually sender information. Okay, now let us create another one. Okay, this is for the receiver. Okay, so what we are going to do next is that I'm going to copy to replicate this for the receiver information. So I copy the whole thing, copy this. Okay, okay, that is let me just adjust this a little bit. Okay, so here let me put in some break here. Okay, just to separate. Control KD. Okay, this is a break. Okay, next I will put in okay, I will paste the whole thing. Okay, so here this is what we have pasted just now. So sender, I'm going to change this to receiver information. Okay, now when we copy and paste, okay, you can see that all the labels has been converted to label 1, label 2, and so on. So let us change the label. So now this one is LBL receiver name. Okay, this is for the name. Now the address, so it consists of several addresses, address 1 and address 2. So I'm going to change this to, okay, LBL receiver address 2, oh sorry, LBL receiver address 1. Okay, this one will be LBL receiver address 2. Okay, this one will be the postcode. So LBL receiver postcode. This is LBL receiver city, and we have LBL receiver state. Okay, as for the phone number, this will become LBL receiver phone, and lastly we have for the email LBL receiver email. Okay, so let us delete these extra lines. Okay, and after the last part of this table, we put in a break here. Okay, save the work. Okay, the next part is on the invoice. So basically what I will do now is that I will copy this part first. Okay, so this is receiver information. Okay, let's say I put this here, Control KD. Okay, now this is invoice. Okay, now for the last part, we are going to look into the parcel rates. Okay, this is the parcel rates. So what I'm going to do is similar. So I'm going to copy actually the table. Now when I copy the table, okay, so this is the table. So now okay, I'm going to paste this here. Okay, let us readjust. Okay, so now I'm going to actually control KD, so we readjust everything. Okay, so here there are buttons and so on, so which is we are just going to display the labels. So basically what we are going to do now is, first and foremost, of course, we will look one by one. Okay, now this text box, for the weight, so we are going to actually change this to a label, and this will become LBL weight. Okay, the width, so we are going to delete the width. Okay, now here we have the space, so delete this. Okay, now we are not going to use any button here because this is just a display. Okay, so let me highlight this part. Okay, so we have weight. Okay, now in terms of zone and so on, so we are not going to actually add the zone here because we have the address. So basically what we are going to do is that we are going to actually delete the whole row. Okay, so this is related to the category and so on, so I'm going to delete this. Okay, next we have the subtotal. Now the subtotal is actually a label here, so we do not need to change anything here. Okay, so if we have a look at the design, okay, so we have send information, and this is the invoice. Okay. Okay, so what we need actually a line spacing between this grand total and this button. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to put a break here, okay, below the table and above this button. So if we go to look into the design view, okay, now this is better. Okay, now one thing that we should have in any invoice is that we need to have one thing is that we need to have a date of transaction, date and time of transaction, and also we need to have some kind of tracking number or invoice number. So this will be generated automatically because we do not want to key in anything. So what we are going to do is that we are going to just add two rows at the top. Okay, let us have this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to actually copy the first row here. Okay, so I'm going to copy the first row here, and above this I'm going to paste. Okay, now here, first thing that we want to do is that we want to have this as the date and time actually. So the date or date and time. Okay, let's see, we put this at date, and the ID we change to LBL date. Okay, now so this is date. Now the second thing is that we need to have some kind of invoice number, so I paste that again, a row. So here we change this to invoice number. Okay, so this is invoice number. Okay, invoice number, and the ID would be LBL invoice number. Okay, so this is actually two rows that I have just added. So if we look into the design, see, now we have the date and invoice number here. Okay, let us run the program. Okay, we will fill in some of the this is the sender information. Okay, now this is the receiver information. Okay, let's say that we are going to have some data here. Let's say the weight is 1.95. We click calculate. So basically this is within this category. So this is the subtotal, the SST amount, which is the 6%. Now the total, the rounding, and also the grand total. Okay, now for this part, this is the final part. Okay, whereby we need to actually display the complete information, such as we have the sender information, we have the name, address, phone number, email. Okay, similar to the receiver information, and this is the invoice. Much of the information that we need to display within this particular view is a little bit more complicated, because we are using web user controls. So using web user controls, we cannot directly actually retrieve the data similar to if the controls are on the same form. So here we need to create a programming interface that allows the particular view for within the PosLaju form to have access to the data from the controller. Okay, so let me actually close this web browser first. Okay, now the first thing that we are going to do is that I'm going to look into the sender receiver. So this is the sender receiver. So I'm going to actually interested in the C# part. Okay, now this is the C#. So what we need to do is that we need to declare public access properties of some of the data, such as name, address 1, address 2, city, postcode, state, phone number, and also the email. Okay, so here we actually what we are going to do is that we are going to declare this as a property. So this is actually user defined properties. Okay, now the first is that we need to declare name. So it must be public. Okay, the access modifier is public, so this must be a public. So now we have string. Okay, let's say that this is okay name. Okay, the convention for properties is that you start with a uppercase. So basically, if actually the particular property consists of several items, so you need to use a title case. So now this is name. So here, okay, what we need to do is that we need to actually put in a get command. So this is a get and set, but here we are only interested in just the get, because we are going to return that particular data from this controller, from this user control to the other web form that is calling that particular property. Okay, now here we have the return. Okay, now we can take this from txt name dot text. Okay, so this is the first one. Okay, now once we have done the first one, so what I'm going to do is just I'm going to actually copy and do some changes here. Okay, okay, so I'm going actually, of course this is a name because this is a duplicate. Okay, now the second one is that we want to have this as address. So address, we have two addresses, so address 1 and address 2. So this property is address 1, and we are going to return the txt address 1. Okay, okay, next we have address 2. So this is another property, and we are going to return txt address 2. Okay, next we are going to have a city, postcode, and so on. So let's say we have city, and we are going to return txt city. Okay, the next one is postcode. So we are returning txt postcode. Okay, we have another 3. Okay, so let me copy this. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now after postcode, we need to have state. So this property is state, and we are returning ddl state. Okay, dot selected item. Okay, selected item. Okay, and this is, we have 2 string. Okay, now we have state. So next we have what? Okay, we need to have the phone, and here we have this txt phone. Okay, and finally we have the last is that we have email. So I'm going to do this as email, and we are returning txt email. Okay, so let us just put in some lines. So okay, so here, okay, now this is for the server receiver user control. Okay, next we are going to look for another one, which is the parcel rates. So I'm going to open this parcel rates. Okay, this is the ASCX. So what we interested in is the ASCX. Okay, let us have a look. So do we need to change anything else here? Okay, so there are several properties that we need to actually declare, especially when it relates to the subtotal, the amount, total, rounding, because all are calculated here. So we also need to declare a public property so that the form can actually access this data. Okay, so here we can put this anywhere. We can put on top, or we can put at the bottom. It does not matter. Okay, let's say that I'm going to, okay, the last one, okay, but not beyond this. Okay, now you can see that this one. Okay, so there are several properties that we should declare. First, let me have this public. Okay, the first is that we are going to have one property for the weight. Okay, so this is the weight, and we also have the get. So within the get, we return, okay, return. So this is related to the text txt weight. This is the text box for the weight just now. Okay, okay, the next one is that we are going to copy and paste first, so that then we will change accordingly. Let's say a couple of you here. Okay, the next we have subtotal. So although subtotal is actually a double, but for the purpose of these properties, I would like to just put this as a string, because it's easier to actually to read. But later on, if we need these particular values, we can always convert back to double. Okay, so here we have public string. Now this is subtotal, so this is a property. Now we return, because this is a calculated, so this is a label. So LBL, we have subtotal here. Okay, LBL subtotal. Okay, the next is the SST amount. So we have another one, SST amount. Okay, SST amount, and we return here as LBL, okay, SST amount. Okay, next we have the total. So here we return LBL total, and lastly we have the grand total, and we are returning the label LBL grand total. Okay, so basically we have covered these are the values that we are going to return, so that this can be accessed by the PosLaju form, and especially in view 4, so we'll need to have access to uh, this particular data and this particular properties.